The lights went out in Vance Tower, plunging me into total darkness, trapped in my executive elevator. I screamed, but no one could hear me. Then, through the chaos, I saw him. Luke, the delivery driver I'd dismissed countless times, risking his life, climbing into the unstable shaft to save me. In the emergency room, as he pulled out his ID, something slipped from his worn wallet and clattered to the floor. Fate, it seems, has a way of putting people in your path for a reason, whether you like it or not. The sunrise over Atlanta was a private spectacle for Eleanor Vance, painted in muted golds and greys across the towering glass of her penthouse apartment in Buckhead. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, a heavy silk robe draped around her, a freshly brewed cup of Kona coffee steaming in her hand. Below, the city was waking up, a sprawling network of ambition she had, in many ways, helped to build. Vance Holdings, her life's work, touched almost every corner of this skyline. Her apartment was immaculate, a testament to her precise nature. White marble countertops gleamed, minimalist art adorned the walls, and a faint scent of expensive lilies hung in the air. There was no clutter, no forgotten toys, no evidence of a life lived beyond her own solitary rhythm. She preferred it that way, she told herself. Order was control, and control was power. She picked up her phone, her thumb hovering over a contact marked Mark's son. It had been weeks since their last brief call, a quick exchange of pleasantries that felt more like a business update than a conversation between family. Mark was in California, pursuing some obscure art career she didn't quite understand, a world away from the spreadsheets and boardrooms she navigated daily. She sighed, her thumb dropping from the screen. He'd call when he had something to say, or more likely, when he needed something. The thought was bitter, a familiar ache she usually ignored. Instead, she moved to her vanity, a polished mahogany surface laden with crystal bottles and silver brushes. She picked up a hand mirror, turning her face to catch the morning light. 58 years old, and the lines around her eyes were deepening, etchings of countless decisions and sleepless nights. She saw the CEO, the formidable woman who commanded respect in any room. But sometimes, in moments like these, she also saw a flicker of the girl she used to be, before the ambition had consumed everything. A girl who had once dreamed of simpler joys, of a family she could nurture. She began her meticulous routine, applying serums and creams, her movements practiced and efficient. Her mind was already racing through the day's agenda, a contentious merger meeting at 10, a lunch with a potential investor, a charity gala she was obligated to attend tonight. Every hour accounted for, every moment purposeful. It left little room for introspection, which was exactly how she liked it. As she fastened a delicate gold chain around her neck, a familiar, almost unconscious habit took over. Her fingers briefly brushed the hollow of her collarbone, a faint, phantom weight she hadn't felt in decades. It was the space where an antique silver locket with a soaring eagle engraving had once rested. A cherished gift from her grandmother, lost so long ago in a park that now held another one of Vance Holdings' sleek new office buildings. She hadn't thought about that locket in years, not consciously anyway, but the ghost of its presence lingered, a silent reminder of a youth long past and a connection that had vanished. She finished dressing, choosing a sharp navy power suit that hugged her frame perfectly. She ran a hand over the smooth fabric, checking for any stray wrinkles. Downstairs, her driver would be waiting. Another day was about to begin, another day of building an empire, one impeccably managed moment at a time. The silence of the apartment echoed behind her as she walked out, the only sound the soft click of her heels on the marble floor. The first hint of morning in Luke Reed's small apartment wasn't the sun, but the rumble of the early MARTA train passing just a few blocks away. At 32, Luke didn't need an alarm clock. His internal rhythm was synced to the needs of Mama Rosie's bakery. He stretched, joints popping, in his narrow twin bed. The room was tidy, if a little cramped, with stacks of paperback novels on a bedside crate and a faded map of Georgia tacked to the wall above his desk. His landlady, Mrs. Henderson, had given him the map, saying it was good to know your roots, even if you hadn't found all of them yet. He padded to the small kitchen, the linoleum cool under his bare feet. The aroma of strong coffee was already brewing, a gift from Mrs. Henderson, who often set her pot to run early and shared a thermos with him. He poured a mug, adding a splash of shelf-stable milk. Breakfast was simple, a slice of toast with some strawberry jam from a jar that was almost empty, a careful consideration of his budget for the week. While the toast browned, Luke pulled his worn leather wallet from his back pocket and checked its contents. A few bills, his driver's license, and tucked into a small, hidden flap, the antique silver locket. It had a finely detailed engraving of a soaring eagle on the front, its wings spread wide as if in flight. He ran his thumb over the cool metal, the familiar sensation a comfort. His adoptive mother, bless her heart, had told him it was found with him when she brought him home as a baby. "Your only real clue, honey," she'd said, "to who you were before you were ours." Inside, it was always empty. He'd imagined faces in there sometimes, fleeting images of a young woman with kind eyes, or a strong man with a gentle smile. But the faces never solidified, and he quickly tucked the locket back away. It wasn't a source of sadness. Not really. Just a quiet question mark in the back of his mind, a piece of a puzzle he wasn't sure he'd ever finish. He had a good life, good people. That was what mattered. He finished his coffee, washed his mug, and grabbed his work uniform. A cheerful Mama Rosie's bakery t-shirt that had seen better days, but was still clean. As he tied the laces of his sturdy delivery shoes, he thought about his route today. Vance Tower was on the list, a regular stop for their executive catering orders. He always tried to be extra friendly there, knowing how important those big clients were to Mama Rosie. Stepping out of his apartment, the morning air was already warm and thick with the promise of a Georgia summer day. Downstairs, Mrs. Henderson was on her porch, watering a pot of vibrant red geraniums. Her white hair was pinned back neatly, and she wore a faded apron over her house dress. "Morning, Mrs. H," Luke called out, flashing his easy smile. "Those geraniums are looking mighty fine today." She chuckled, a warm, reedy sound. "Well, good morning to you too, Lucas. You're up with the sun as always. You got a big day of deliveries?" "Looks like it," he replied, adjusting the strap of his delivery bag. "Just checking in. You need anything from the store later? I can swing by after my last drop." "Oh, you're a sweet boy," she said, waving a hand. "I'm all set for today, but thank you for asking. Just stay safe out there in that traffic." "Always do," he promised, giving her a small salute before heading down the worn concrete steps. He liked that about his neighborhood, the way everyone looked out for each other. It was a different kind of wealth than what he imagined Eleanor Vance had, but it felt just as valuable. He hopped onto his old but reliable delivery van, the engine sputtering to life with a familiar grumble. Another day, another chance to bring a little joy, one fresh-baked pastry at a time. He pulled out of the driveway, the radio playing an old country song, and pointed the van towards the bustling downtown, toward Vance Tower, towards a destiny he couldn't even begin to imagine. Eleanor Vance barely registered the delivery driver from Mama Rosie's bakery. Her assistant Brenda usually handled the catering, ensuring the conference room was stocked with fresh coffee and those notoriously good pastries for the morning board meeting. But today, a last-minute change of plans meant Eleanor found herself walking through the bustling executive reception area just as the driver, a young man named Luke Reed, was setting down a tray of croissants on the polished mahogany table. He looked up, offering a polite, almost eager smile. Eleanor gave him a curt nod, her gaze already sweeping past him to the financial reports on the table. "Good morning, Ms. Vance," Luke offered, his voice friendly. "Everything looks set for your meeting." Eleanor merely hummed in acknowledgement, her mind already consumed by the figures flashing in her head. Her focus was on the new security measures she was rolling out, a cost-saving initiative that also streamlined vendor access. It had been a long overdue decision. She glanced at the memo Brenda had placed prominently on her desk just this morning, detailing the new vendor and delivery protocols. One key change was the rerouting of all commercial deliveries to the south loading dock, a good 10-minute walk from the main tower's elevators, effective next Monday. It also included a new mandatory parking fee for commercial vehicles, a small, flat charge, but one that Eleanor felt was perfectly justified to offset security costs. She barely gave it a second thought beyond the projected savings. As Luke gathered his empty baskets, Eleanor heard him say, "Excuse me, Ms. Vance. I just saw the new delivery memo by the service entrance about the south loading dock and the parking fees." Eleanor turned, a hint of impatience flickering in her eyes. She disliked being interrupted, especially by what she considered minor operational details. "Yes, Mr. Reed," she said, her voice cool and perfectly modulated. "It's a necessary adjustment, streamlines our security, enhances efficiency, standard procedure for a building of this stature." Luke shifted his weight, his friendly smile faltering just a touch. "I understand the need for security, ma'am, truly. But that south loading dock is quite a trek, especially with heavy orders, and the new parking fee, well, for us drivers, it's going to cut into our already slim margins. Most of us work on tight schedules and even tighter budgets. It could mean fewer deliveries or longer days, just to break even." He gestured vaguely, his gaze earnest. "It's not just me, ma'am. All the local businesses, the florists, the dry cleaners, the caterers like Mama Rosie's. It'll be a real pinch for folks." Eleanor listened, her expression unreadable. She steepled her fingers, a habit she adopted when she was about to deliver an unyielding decision. "Mr. Reed," she began, her tone devoid of malice, but equally devoid of warmth, "Vance Holdings makes decisions based on strategic planning and the overall welfare of our tenants and our corporation. These protocols were thoroughly vetted by our operations team and reflect the best practices for a Class A office building in downtown Atlanta." She paused, a dismissive flick of her wrist punctuating her words. "We understand that changes can sometimes create minor inconveniences, but these measures are non-negotiable. I'm confident you and your colleagues will adapt. It's part of doing business in a premium commercial space. Now, if you'll excuse me, my board meeting is about to begin." She turned away before Luke could respond, walking briskly towards the conference room. The soft closing of the door was a finality, a polite but firm barrier. Luke stood for a moment, the weight of Eleanor's words settling over him like a fine dust. He knew better than to argue further. What was a few dollars, a few extra steps, to someone like Eleanor Vance? To him, it was a tank of gas, a week's worth of coffee, or a small gift for Mrs. Henderson. He sighed, adjusting the strap of his empty delivery bag. He picked up his baskets, his shoulders slumping just a fraction. He made his way to the service elevator, the familiar chime a cold comfort. As the doors closed, he knew Eleanor Vance had already forgotten their brief exchange, her world untroubled by the small ripple her decision would send through his. The city outside Eleanor Vance's office window was a shimmering tapestry of evening lights, each sparkle a reminder of the commerce she commanded. But inside, on the 50th floor of Vance Tower, the silence was absolute, save for the low hum of the air conditioning. Her assistant, Brenda, had left hours ago, and the last of her executives had departed with a polite, "Good night, Ms. Vance." Eleanor remained, hunched over her vast mahogany desk, the glow of her laptop illuminating a stack of meticulously organized papers. She was reviewing new budget projections, dissecting every line item for inefficiencies. The increased security measures, the new vendor protocols, all small cogs in a larger machine designed to optimize profit and minimize risk. She felt a familiar surge of satisfaction when she identified a potential cost saving, a tiny victory in her relentless pursuit of control. Yet, as the hours wore on and the building emptied further, a familiar hollowness began to creep in, seeping into the corners of the vast office. The silence, once a comfort, now felt heavy, pressing. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. Her mind, usually a sharp instrument of logic, drifted. She thought of Mark, her son, in California, the chasm between them wider than the continent itself. She thought of her own childhood, of a grandmother's warm embrace, and the simple, unconditional love that felt so distant now. Without thinking, her fingers went to her throat, a soft, involuntary touch to the hollow, where a beloved antique silver locket with a soaring eagle engraving had once rested. The locket her grandmother had given her in 1985, lost in a park soon after. A small, painful memory she rarely allowed herself to revisit. It was just an object, she told herself, a thing. But even now, decades later, the ghost of its presence sometimes returned. A faint echo of connection she hadn't realized she missed until it was gone. She shook her head, pulling herself back to the spreadsheets. Sentimental musings were a distraction, a weakness she couldn't afford. Miles away, in a dimly lit service corridor of Vance Tower, Luke Reed pushed his empty delivery cart towards the freight elevator. The Mama Rosie's bakery van was parked down at the south loading dock, another 10-minute walk through the winding basement tunnels. He was exhausted. The new protocols had added at least an hour to his route today, making every delivery a longer haul, every parking fee a bite out of his meager earnings. He hadn't complained further after his conversation with Ms. Vance. What was the point? People like her didn't understand, didn't really see the ripple effect of their decisions on people like him. He just had to work harder. He sighed, leaning against the cold concrete wall, waiting for the service elevator. His phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Henderson, asking if he'd remembered to pick up her special tea. He smiled, pulling out his wallet to double-check his grocery list. Nestled in a secret fold, as always, was the antique silver locket with a soaring eagle engraving. He pulled it out, turning it over in his calloused fingers. The faint initials EV on the back were barely visible from years of wear. It was his good luck charm, his only tangible link to the family he'd never known. His adoptive mother had always told him it was special, a clue. He sometimes wondered about his birth mother, who she was, why she'd given him up. Was she kind? Was she happy? He imagined a woman who perhaps, like him, struggled but found joy in small things. He gave the locket a gentle squeeze. And since you've made it this far, go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps me keep bringing stories like this. The elevator doors finally hissed open, startling him. He quickly tucked the locket back into his wallet, a private comfort. The empty service elevator felt enormous, carrying him down through the belly of the building, a stark contrast to the luxurious executive elevators that served the upper floors. He imagined Ms. Vance up there, still in her pristine office, utterly unaware of the tired delivery driver or the tiny, eagle-engraved locket that connected their worlds in a way neither could possibly fathom. He stepped out into the basement, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and began his long walk to the van, ready for a warm meal and the quiet comfort of his small apartment. The summer afternoon had been deceptively bright, but now, outside the 50-story windows of Vance Tower, the sky turned a bruising purple. Eleanor Vance was alone in her executive office, trying to finalize a presentation before her driver took her to a charity gala. She hated these forced social events, preferring the quiet hum of productivity. A sudden, violent gust of wind rattled the glass, making her jump. Then, the lights flickered once, twice, and died. A low growl of thunder rolled through downtown Atlanta, immediately followed by the angry crackle of an electrical surge from somewhere deep within the building. Her monitor went dark, plunging the office into an abrupt, unsettling gloom. The air conditioning, usually a steady whisper, choked to a halt. Eleanor, startled, pushed back from her desk. The emergency lights in the corridor flickered on, casting long, eerie shadows. She grabbed her handbag and headed for her private executive elevator, a plush, silent chamber that usually whisked her from her perch to the ground floor in seconds. She pressed the down button. Nothing. She pressed it again, a prickle of annoyance turning into genuine concern. The building was completely dark, save for the weak emergency lighting. No power. This was far more than a simple flicker. A low, guttural shudder ripped through the building, a sound like tortured metal. Then, with a jarring lurch, her elevator doors finally opened. Eleanor stepped in, relieved, but as she reached to press the lobby button, another violent shudder rocked the entire shaft. The lights inside the car winked out, replaced by a single sickly orange glow from an emergency panel above the door. The elevator jolted, groaned, and then stopped dead, suspended somewhere between the 40th and 41st floors. Eleanor gasped, her heart leaping into her throat. She gripped the cold steel railing, her carefully composed facade crumbling into raw fear. She pressed the emergency call button repeatedly. A static-filled voice answered, "Vance Tower Operations. We have a system-wide failure, Ms. Vance. We're working on it. Stay calm." But staying calm felt impossible, as the elevator car swayed ever so slightly, a metal box hanging precariously in the dark. The faint smell of something acrid, like burning wire, began to seep into the cabin. Meanwhile, miles below, Luke Reed had just finished his last delivery of the day, a small order for the security office on the ground floor. He'd barely made it back to the south loading dock before the storm hit, and the power outage caught him inside the service elevator on the 5th floor. After what felt like an eternity, the emergency manual override engaged, and he was able to pry the doors open and climb out into the dimly lit service corridor. He hurried towards the main lobby, checking his phone, which showed a full-blown grid failure across the city. He heard the muffled screams of people trapped in other elevators, the frantic shouts of the building's few remaining staff. Suddenly, a voice, clearer than the others, carried down the echoing shaft of the executive elevators. "Help! Is anyone there? I'm trapped!" Luke recognized it. Eleanor Vance, the woman who'd dismissed his concerns, who lived in a world so far removed from his own. He could have walked out, gone home, gone to Mrs. Henderson. He had every reason to leave, but he didn't. He saw the panicked face of Mr. Henderson, the building's old engineer, struggling with a maintenance panel. "Mr. H, what's happening?" "Main executive elevator, son," Mr. Henderson shouted, his face streaked with sweat. "Stuck up high between 40 and 41. Auxiliary power failed on that line. Smelling smoke from that shaft. No telling how long it'll hold. They can't get to her." Luke didn't hesitate. He knew these corridors better than most, thanks to years of deliveries and friendly chats with Mr. Henderson. He saw an emergency access panel that led directly into the service shaft adjacent to the executive one. "Which shaft is it, Mr. H? Give me the override schematics for the safety brake." Mr. Henderson, seeing the determination in Luke's eyes, didn't argue. He quickly pointed to a faded diagram. "There. Manual override is a bypass lever. But it's dangerous, son. Live wires could be exposed. Falling debris." "Someone's up there, Mr. H," Luke yelled, already pulling on a pair of emergency work gloves he'd grabbed from a nearby utility closet. "And they need help." He squeezed through the narrow panel, entering the dark, cavernous space between the elevator shafts. The air was thick with dust and the metallic tang of ozone. Emergency lights barely pierced the darkness. He could hear Eleanor's faint, distressed cries echoing from above. He began to climb, pulling himself up by the emergency ladder, his feet finding purchase on slippery metal rungs. Sparks flew intermittently from exposed wires. A piece of insulation broke loose and tumbled past his head, narrowly missing him. He felt the heat radiating from somewhere above. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he reached the jammed safety brake mechanism, a complex tangle of wires and heavy steel. Smoke was definitely billowing from the executive shaft, just inches from the trapped elevator car. He could hear Eleanor coughing. "Hang on," he yelled, his voice rough from the smoke. "I'm right here. Don't you worry. I've got you, okay?" He gritted his teeth, his muscles straining, and with a grunt, he manually forced the heavy lever, bypassing the jammed brake. The ancient mechanism groaned in protest, a shower of sparks raining down on him. A jagged edge of metal caught his forearm, tearing a deep, stinging gash, but the lever clicked into place. Suddenly, Eleanor's elevator lurched, not downwards, but just enough to allow emergency services, who were now on scene, to engage their own manual controls and slowly, agonizingly, lower the car a few critical feet. The doors groaned, then slowly, with a loud shriek of metal, began to pry open. Eleanor, was safe. Luke slumped against the cold metal, gasping, smoke burning his lungs, the pain in his arm a dull throb. "You're okay," he whispered to himself. "You're really okay, Mum." He hadn't meant to say it, hadn't even thought it, but the word had simply escaped, a reflex of profound relief and protectiveness for the woman he had just saved. The shuddering elevator doors finally split open, letting in a chaotic flood of flashing lights and concerned faces. Eleanor Vance stumbled out, gasping for air, her lungs burning from the acrid smoke. Her tailored suit was smudged, her perfectly coiffed hair disheveled, but she was alive. Emergency responders swarmed her, offering water and blankets, but her eyes, still wide with shock, immediately darted past them. She saw him then, Lucas Reed, the delivery driver. He was slumped against the cold metal wall of the shaft, his face pale and smudged with soot, a crimson stain spreading on his arm where jagged metal had cut him. 2 paramedics were already carefully extricating him, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. He looked utterly spent, but as he was gently lowered onto a stretcher, his eyes flickered open and met hers. There was no resentment there, only a profound weariness. "He saved me," Eleanor choked out, the words raw, tearing at her throat. He climbed in there." Brenda, her assistant, materialized by her side, clutching her arm. "Ms. Vance, are you all right? We need to get you checked out. Your driver is waiting outside." But Eleanor shook her head, a stubbornness she rarely showed for her own well-being taking over. "No, not yet. I need to know he's all right. He's going to the hospital, isn't he?" A paramedic nodded. "Piedmont, Atlanta. Smoke inhalation. Deep laceration. Possible concussion. He was lucky, ma'am." Eleanor felt a strange, insistent pull. This was more than just gratitude for a good deed. This was a responsibility she couldn't dismiss. "I'm going with him," she announced, her voice surprisingly firm, despite her shaky hands. Brenda looked utterly bewildered. "Miss Vance, with all due respect, your gala—" "Cancel it," Eleanor cut her off, turning to the paramedics. "Which ambulance is he in? I'll follow." The drive to Piedmont Atlanta Hospital was a blur of flashing lights and siren wails. Eleanor sat in the back of her chauffeured car, staring at the ambulance ahead, a knot of unfamiliar worry tightening in her stomach. At the emergency room, the chaos continued. Luke was whisked away behind swinging doors marked trauma, and Eleanor found herself in a sterile, brightly lit waiting area, a world away from the polished silence of her office. Brenda, still trying to manage the situation, offered to call Eleanor's personal doctor, but Eleanor waved her off. "Just find out about him, Brenda. Lucas Reed." She sat on the hard plastic chair, feeling utterly out of place. Doctors and nurses moved with brisk efficiency, their faces etched with the daily weight of life and death. Eleanor felt a profound unease, a vulnerability she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. She watched the clock tick, each minute stretching into an eternity. It was unlike her to wait, to be helpless, to care so deeply about a stranger. But Luke wasn't a stranger anymore. He was the man who had faced fire and falling debris to save her life. The man she had dismissed as just a lazy delivery boy. The irony was a bitter taste in her mouth. After what felt like hours, a kind-faced nurse approached her. "Ms. Vance, Mr. Reed is stable. He's going to be fine. He has a few stitches on his arm, and we're keeping him for observation due to the smoke inhalation and a mild concussion. He's a very brave young man." Eleanor let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Can I see him?" The nurse hesitated. "He's resting now, and we're still running tests. Maybe in a little while. We've moved him to a room in the observation unit." As she spoke, the nurse picked up a worn leather wallet that had been on the intake counter, likely belonging to Luke. A small, distinctive object had partially slipped out of a hidden flap. It was an antique silver locket with a finely detailed engraving of a soaring eagle on the front. Eleanor's breath hitched. Her eyes fixated on the locket, a strange jolt going through her. It was so familiar, a ghost from her past. Her hand instinctively reached out, a phantom ache in the hollow of her throat, where her grandmother's cherished gift once rested. A wave of intense, inexplicable recognition washed over her, a feeling so potent it made her dizzy. She didn't understand why, but her heart thumped hard against her ribs. She couldn't tear her gaze away from the locket as the nurse tucked it back into the wallet. Something, she thought, something about that locket felt like a piece of herself, long forgotten, now suddenly, mysteriously resurfacing. Eleanor Vance paced the sterile waiting room of Piedmont Atlanta Hospital, the hard plastic chairs a stark contrast to the plush seating in her executive suite. Her tailored suit was wrinkled, her usually impeccable composure shattered. She had never felt so utterly helpless, so entirely out of control. Each passing minute felt like an hour. The smell of antiseptic and sickness hung heavy in the air, stirring a deep, unfamiliar anxiety within her. She kept replaying the image of Luke, covered in soot, the blood blooming on his arm, his eyes meeting hers with an exhaustion that tore at something deep inside her. He was the man she had dismissed, the boy she had unknowingly put in a difficult position with her new delivery rules, and he had nearly died saving her. The guilt was a cold, sharp stone in her stomach. A nurse, a kind woman with warm eyes and a tired smile, finally approached her. "Ms. Vance, Mr. Reed is awake. We've finished stitching his arm, and he's on his way to an observation room. The doctor just wants to keep an eye on him for a few hours with the smoke inhalation and a slight concussion. He's asking for his wallet, so we can get his emergency contact information." Eleanor felt a wave of relief so profound it nearly buckled her knees. "Thank goodness," she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. Can I just see him for a moment? Just to thank him properly?" "Of course," the nurse said gently, already turning. "He's in room 3B. I'll just get his wallet to him." Eleanor followed, her heart still thrumming with a mixture of fear and a burgeoning, unexpected tenderness. They reached a quiet section of the emergency department. Luke was propped up in a bed, a bandage visible on his arm, his face still pale but with a faint, hopeful colour returning. He managed a weak smile when he saw Eleanor. "Ms. Vance," he rasped, his voice a little hoarse. "You're okay?" "You saved my life, Luke," Eleanor said, walking closer to his bedside, her voice catching. "You truly did. I don't know how to thank you." The nurse handed Luke his worn leather wallet. "Just need you to confirm your contact info, Mr. Reed." Luke fumbled for his driver's license, his movements slow and a little clumsy from the concussion. As he pulled out the card, something else slipped from a small, hidden flap in his wallet. It tumbled out, glinting under the harsh hospital lights, and clattered onto the linoleum floor with a tiny, sharp sound. Eleanor's gaze locked onto it. The world seemed to slow. There, on the sterile floor, lay an antique silver locket. It had a finely detailed engraving of a soaring eagle on the front, its wings spread wide, as if caught in mid-flight. Her breath hitched. A wave of ice-cold shock, recognition, and a deep, forgotten pain washed over her so intensely it made her dizzy. Her hand trembled as she instinctively bent down, picking up the cool, familiar metal. Her fingers brushed over the back, feeling the faint, worn etching of the initials, EV. "This," she whispered, her voice barely audible, raw with disbelief. This is mine. My grandmother gave this to me. I lost this locket in 1985. It was my grandmother's gift." Her fingers clutched it, pressing it into her palm as if trying to merge it back into her very being. Luke, dazed but hearing her, looked at her, then at the locket in her hand. His eyes, still a little clouded, widened slightly. My adoptive mum told me it was with me when I was born," he said weakly, his voice a strained whisper. "She said it was the only thing from my birth family, my only link to who I came from." The nurse, who had been quietly making notes, paused. She looked from Eleanor, clutching the locket, to Luke, and then glanced at his intake form, which was open on her clipboard. Mr. Reed's intake form says he was adopted here in Atlanta in 1991, she stated, her voice gentle but clear. He was just a baby. Eleanor's blood ran cold. The locket she lost that year in 1985. The adopted baby. The city. The year 1991. The fragments of her buried past. The secret she had kept locked away for so long, suddenly collided in a shattering explosion. She looked at Luke's face, really seeing him for the very first time. The kind eyes, the gentle smile he always offered, the way his jawline mirrored a family trait she had almost forgotten, a striking resemblance she hadn't dared to imagine before. The undeniable truth crashed down on her with the force of a tidal wave. Her son. The baby boy she had given away in a moment of ambition and fear. He was here. He was the humble delivery driver she had dismissed, the hero who had risked his life for her. The crushing weight of regret, the profound shock of recognition, and a devastating grief for the lost years hit her all at once. Her hand, still clutching the antique silver locket, began to shake uncontrollably. Her eyes filled with tears, blurring Luke's face, blurring the sterile room, blurring everything but the impossible, heartbreaking truth that was now laid bare before her. Eleanor stood frozen. The antique silver locket with its soaring eagle engraving clutched so tightly in her hand that the delicate metal bit into her palm. The sterile air of the hospital room suddenly felt impossibly heavy, suffocating. Luke lay in the bed, his face still pale from the ordeal, his eyes wide and searching, a mixture of bewilderment and a dawning, terrifying understanding. The nurse, sensing the profound shift in the room, quietly excused herself, leaving them alone. Eleanor slowly walked to the side of Luke's bed, her legs feeling like lead. All the polished composure, the formidable presence that was Eleanor Vance, CEO, had utterly vanished. She was just a woman, a mother, standing before her son, the truth a raw, gaping wound between them. Her eyes, usually so sharp and analytical, were now clouded with unshed tears, her gaze fixed on Luke's face, searching for resemblances she had never allowed herself to see, the curve of his jaw, the strength in his brow, a flicker of something in his kind eyes that mirrored her own grandmother's gentle spirit. "Luke," she finally managed, her voice a fragile whisper, broken by a lifetime of buried regret. She sank onto the uncomfortable chair beside his bed, the locket still clenched in her hand. I don't know what to say." Her gaze dropped to her hands, the locket a burning weight. "This locket. My grandmother gave it to me when I was 20. I lost it in Piedmont Park in 1985. She paused, taking a shaky breath. "I was young, ambitious. My family, they had plans for me, for Vance Holdings." She looked up, her eyes pleading for understanding, for forgiveness he wasn't yet ready to give. "When I found out I was pregnant in 1991, it felt like my world was going to collapse. My career, everything I'd worked for. There was so much pressure, so much shame. I was scared, so terribly scared." A single tear traced a path down her cheek, a tear she hadn't allowed herself to shed in decades. "I made a choice, a terrible, selfish choice. I gave you up for adoption, a closed adoption. I never looked back. I told myself it was for the best, for your future, for mine." Luke listened, his expression unreadable, a mixture of disbelief and a deep, quiet hurt. He had always wondered about his birth mother, imagined her, dreamt of her, but never in his wildest dreams had he pictured Eleanor Vance, the cold, powerful woman who had just last week dismissed his genuine concerns about the new delivery fees. The woman he had just pulled from a burning elevator shaft. The silence stretched between them, thick with the weight of 32 lost years. "I didn't know," Eleanor choked out, her voice barely audible. "I swear, I never knew you were the boy who came here, delivering pastries. I never looked. I just dismissed you, like I dismiss so many things, so many people." She held out the antique silver locket, her hand trembling. This was the only thing I had that day that connected me to my family, and I lost it. And somehow it found its way to you, to my son, the boy I gave away, who just saved my life. Luke reached out, slowly taking the locket from her. His fingers brushed hers, a tentative electric touch. He turned the locket over, tracing the worn engraving of the soaring eagle, then the faint EV initials on the back. It was real. This woman, the CEO, the stranger who was no longer a stranger, was his mother. The truth was devastating, bewildering, and in some quiet corner of his heart, a little bit freeing. Eleanor watched him, her heart aching with a grief so profound, she wondered how she had lived with it buried for so long. There were no grand gestures, no offers of money or power to fix this. Just a broken woman, stripped bare, facing the son she had unknowingly wronged for so long. The class gap, the wealth, the power, it all dissolved in the fluorescent hum of that hospital room, replaced by the raw, undeniable tie of blood. "I am so sorry, Luke," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I am so sorry." Luke looked at the locket in his hand, then up at Eleanor. The anger, the confusion, the quiet hurt, it was all there, swirling inside him. But beneath it, a faint, fragile sense of recognition, of a hidden tie finally brought to light. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Your support is what brings these stories to more people.